So, welcome everyone to this episode of All About Soul. I'm Inga, and I have a guest, Kristen Windsor, with me. And Kristen works with trauma healing using her own approach based on neuroscience. And Kristen, first of all, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be here. I'm excited for a super juicy conversation.
Wonderful. And I'd like to ask you about your own healing journey. What brought you to this place? What brought you to work with trauma?
Yeah, it's been a really miraculous journey that started in a lot of pain and has, progressed to a lot of healing and liberation and the peace, joy, and freedom that's possible when we truly transform stuff at the root. So, my journey started from a very early age. I started battling mental health stuff, insomnia, depression, anxiety, dissociation, night terrors. Like things just got really rough from a very young age, and I didn't know why until many years later. And so I was in mental health and trauma treatment for 10 years, and I saw over 100 doctors in that time, therapists, psychiatrists, tried dozens and dozens of combos of dozens of meds over the years. I did the math, and I took over 5,000 pills total in the time that I was on psychiatric meds, like all together in all the years. And it doesn't naturally work with the way that our brain and body are actually meant to thrive. And so I'm sure it ended up doing more harm than good. And same with the therapy approaches, it was treating the surface symptoms and leading me to revisit past traumas, which just kept re-traumatizing my body and kept me coping instead of actually healing. And so after 10 years of that, I'd experienced more traumas as an adult, and PTSD and just all of these things were very, very overwhelming. It led me to complete disability. And during that time of struggling, there was relational abuse that led to traumatic brain injuries, which caused me to stop forming new memories. And that lasted for 5 years. And then on the other side of that, I had no memory of my life. And it turns out that all of the battles had started because of sexual abuse at age 4 that nobody had known about. And so I later found out about that in my mid 20s when I finally quit traditional healthcare and started forging my own healing path. It was during that time that I taught myself neuroscience and started experimenting with my own healing modalities. And that has developed into the methods that I now teach in my business. I'm now writing in my book. There's over 85 self-healing practices for that embodied healing, not just
Mm.
surface healing or coping, but actually embodying the transformation so that it sticks. And by using my own practices, I was able to create 100% resolution for over 100 health battles, everything from fibromyalgia and full body chronic pain to PTSD and other really intensive struggles. And so a lot of it was, getting to alchemize that trauma and not just revisit the past traumas and kind of try to rewrite the stories and not cope with the surface symptoms disrupting the now, but going deeper into that healing. And the core of it from my own journey and what I now teach my clients is rebuilding a relationship with all the different parts of ourselves. And so you can look at it through the lens of the adult self, the protector parts, and the inner child. And while these terms do touch on things like internal family systems model, the methods I teach are a little bit different because we don't just look at the coping mechanisms. We don't just look at the stress responses in the nervous system and the way those parts adapted to survive, but we actually look at who they are at the core, the neuroscience of why they experience life in the way that they do, and a little bit of the spiritual side of who are you as a soul, never defined by trauma. If we had fully healed the trauma, who would those parts of you be right now? And how can we start to reconnect with their wholeness and really tap into the true identity of those parts? And so the adult self is I'm functioning in daily life, right? The inner children have all these really deep primal needs that we all have as a human being. And the protector parts are trying to bridge those worlds and help the adult self function while kind of keeping the inner children safe. And so the protector parts are usually the ones that have the unhealthy coping mechanisms, and the adult self is the one disconnected from the trauma, and then the inner children are the ones stuck reliving the trauma sensation. So there's all these different parts kind of having their own layers of the inner world, and by building a relationship with each layer of those parts of ourselves and kind of meeting what they need in the present moment, we start to heal trauma at its root for lasting change, without needing to just cope with the symptoms or revisit the past traumas, which can be re-traumatizing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's an amazing story, really. And yeah, with all the therapies. I'd love to hear more about your method, but before we go there, there's something you said about traditional therapies, right? And those methods that have become very common, in that we often believe, and we kind of have come to be, or have been led to believe, that we need to remember the trauma, or to analyze the trauma, or to understand the trauma, right? To go back into a particular situation, which often ends up re-traumatizing us, and it keeps going. So how would you say, is your method different, and why is it I was going to say, why is it better to go to the root cause?
Yeah.
But also, is it possible to heal
Yeah.
without remembering the trauma?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's a couple reasons we don't want to revisit past trauma to heal, okay? And I do want to say this with kind of a grain of salt, because everyone's journeys are so different. The traumas
Absolutely.
we've gone through are so different. Our window of tolerance and what we can look at without re-traumatizing ourselves are different for every person at every stage of the journey. So this doesn't necessarily apply to every stage of every
Yeah.
journey. I just want to say that up front as a disclaimer. But in general, the reason we don't want to revisit the trauma to heal is because every time you go back and reactivate the networks of the brain carrying those memories and the associated stories, sensations, emotional responses, stress responses, all the information around the experience, every time you activate it, those networks undergo rewiring. But if they're not getting new information and you're not able to be regulated and process that new information, it takes that info and it makes it bigger, meaning the symptoms will increase instead of decrease. And so you have to be in a place where you can stay fully grounded and regulated, and the new information can get processed. But that's literally not possible when you're healing trauma, because the whole thing of healing trauma is it dysregulates your nervous system and you're no longer processing the present moment. So, more importantly than going back into the past is being in that presence with yourself and teaching your body safety in the now. Because neuroscience discovered that memories don't store the past for the sake of storing the past. They're storing that information to try and help us navigate our life. So, when we're up here navigating the moment, all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, all of our responses, and just everything happening from the inside out is coming from memories anyway, meaning the trauma data is being activated all of the time. And that's why you get stress responses in daily life. You get those emotional reactions, and you're like, I don't know why I just got so triggered. Like, it's not about the present moment, it's about how your body is navigating the present moment based on the data stored from the past. So, if you're navigating your everyday life and you're teaching your body safety, you're teaching your body, I'm here, it's now, I am loved, I am safe, I feel the sensations in my body, and I'm fully oriented in the now. Then that trauma data is like, oh no, stress, dysregulate. Oh wait, I don't have to dysregulate. I'm safe. Oh, and then it's getting rewired. But you don't have to go revisit the past to make that happen. And you're less likely to re-traumatize yourself because you're just focused on that presence and safety. The other reason it's not so advisable to revisit the past is because it gives the past power. You're saying, yeah, I'm here and it's now and I'm me and I'm living life. But there's this thing in the past of something that happened outside of me in a moment that's no longer here, that has more power than I do right here, right now. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because it creates this illusion that you are separate from your wholeness, you are separate from your power. But if you're focused on that presence and teaching your body safety in the now, teaching yourself a new relationship with those parts of you right here, right now, you're like, wait, I have power here and now. And it has nothing to do with anything that's ever happened before this moment. This moment is where the power is. And reclaiming that power is a big part of healing, because part of trauma is feeling disempowered, feeling like your power was ripped away from you. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, the power that you had during that trauma was taken from you. So if you can be in the present moment, teaching your body safety, teaching those parts of you that you have a loving relationship with them right here, right now, you're going to meet their needs in the now, you're reclaiming that power, then you start to embody a power that heals you. Because if you feel the power that you have now, then the powerlessness that you did not have, or the powerlessness you felt in the past, the power you did not have, that starts to dissolve. It starts to fade. It starts to get alchemized, and it's no longer going to overtake your life. And so we can heal the majority of trauma without needing to revisit the past. And the beautiful part of that is, by the time you get to a place where you're like, there's like maybe 5% of this trauma left to heal, it's safe to go revisit the past, because the stress responses are alchemized. You're safe in your body. You have coping skills that allow you to self-regulate. You're able to be present and practice dual awareness and mindfulness. You've maybe used tools like meditation, and you're able to notice, your brainwave state in your mind and the nervous system regulation in your body, and you're able to notice when it gets stressed and how to self-regulate. And you've already built up this relationship with these parts of you, and your body's like, I'm safe in the now. There's no need to get stressed about something that hasn't happened. You've already created all that healing. Then you can revisit the past and rewrite the story, because it's no longer activated in your body as a trauma.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So in a way, it's becoming bigger than the traumatized part. It's becoming, yeah, yeah. And then the trauma is not so big anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in your power and your presence and your wholeness and self-love, that starts to grow so big that all the shadows from the trauma that seemed like they were larger than life are like, wait, that's a shadow. That's not actually me. And then you can easily shine light on that shadow, because the light of who you are has grown so big and so powerful.
Exactly. Yeah. It's interesting, because I've been coming to the same realizations in the past few years, so kind of in my own way. So you really are speaking my language. So I love that. So what would you say are the main tools that you use? Like how do you work with that, practically speaking?
Yeah, absolutely. The first foundation is having just healthy daily practices, like getting to health on like a very simple level, like getting 8 hours of sleep and going to bed on time and eating healthy and making sure you go for a walk or some form of exercise and movement, and making sure you're getting enough nutrients in your food, and just like the basic things. Because a lot of time when there's trauma, we're very disconnected from the body, and we don't know how to tune in with those needs. You might not be able to feel hunger. You might not be able to sleep at night. You might not be able to exercise because you get dysregulated, or the mind and the body disconnect. And so just reestablishing some daily habits for just basic foundational health are very important. From that space, doing the best you can, right? It might not be perfect. I think once I was able to quit traditional treatment and start my own path, it still took about 3 years to learn how to sleep through the night without a night terror or, insomnia taking over or whatever. But I had practices that helped decrease the symptoms enough that I could increase the well-being just a little bit at a time. And it was, slow and steady progress. From those kind of foundational healthy habits, drinking enough water, just like the basic stuff to keep you alive and healthy. It's really practicing mindfulness and dual awareness, allowing yourself to be oriented in your body in the present moment. When you're eating food, a lot of times the mind drifts away, or the body's reliving trauma, and the bowl of food is gone. You don't even actually remember taking a bite of it. It's just gone because you weren't present for the moment. So it's noticing the breath, noticing the inflow and outflow of the breath, right? Admiring every bite of food like you've never seen it before. That was one of my play prompt practices, was like, if I'd never seen food before, how curious would I be? If I'd never smelled food before, how interesting would that be? If I'd never seen food before, how colorful and dynamic and artistic would it seem? And so kind of just approaching the moment like it's never happened before. It's a brand new moment with the awe and wonder of a child. And you look at the food and you study it and you look at the colors and the kiwis and the berries and the lettuce and like whatever you're eating, to notice the color and the texture and the feeling of it, and to really be submersed in the sensory sensations of it. Because the second that you do that, the second that you're bringing yourself into the now, the second that you're feeling what's happening in the now in your body, the parts of you stuck in trauma are welcomed home and shown a brand new experience. But if you're not in that level, if we're not like in that level of presence, of like really intentionally looking and smelling and tasting and feeling with like our whole body, then there's parts that will be reliving trauma and we won't even know about it. It just comes up as there was some dissociation, or there was some anxiety, or I wasn't fully present, or my mind was distracted, or I was thinking about stuff and I wasn't focused on what my body was feeling. That's how it comes up in the moment. But what's really happening is there's parts of you stuck in the past or in a separate part of the info in your brain and your body, and they don't even know that there is a now. They are just constantly reliving the trauma, reliving the pain, reliving the moments of feeling unsafe and unloved and unsupported and whatever had happened. And so the second that we can bring ourselves into this full body experience of presence, taking a shower, feeling your hands on your head, in your hair, feeling your breath, feeling the water on your skin, and allowing those 3 points of sensory focus to be the entire reality. Your mind isn't elsewhere. Your body isn't elsewhere. You're fully reconnected in the moment, and letting that be a daily ritual in everything, where everything becomes this ritual practice. When you go to cook, when you go to clean, when you go for a walk or cuddle the dog, or like anything, gardening, running errands, anything and everything we do becomes this ritual of meditative mindfulness, where you are engulfed and saturated in the power of your own presence. And as you practice that mindfulness, then there's the dual awareness, which is being able to notice your inner and outer realities at the same time without compromising either of them. Because if you're fully in your inner reality, you're not grounded. You're maybe drowning in your thoughts, drowning in the trauma. Your body's reliving stuff. You're just like completely swallowed whole by this inner world that's maybe going through some painful stuff. If you're only oriented in your outer reality, then you're disconnected from what parts of you are going through. So the goal is to be able to be grounded in our outer reality in terms of the sensory sensations, feeling presence in our body in the now, being able to say, okay, I see that bird, I see that chimney, I feel my feet on the ground, I can feel my hands touching my arms, I'm here, I am now, right? But then also being able to notice the thoughts and the feelings and the memories, but being able to toggle those realities so you stay grounded while observing what you're going through. And so the dual awareness and the mindfulness is laying this foundation for being able to create self-regulation, right? Because when you can be the observer, when you can notice what's happening inside of you, when you can ground yourself in the presence, but still be the witness of your inner world, that's where you start to gain these tools and this power to heal, right? And then you can go deeper into practices, but that's like the first step of like, you have to be able to kind of lay this foundation of just being present and taking care of yourself. And then you can kind of dive deeper into the healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking there were several spiritual traditions that I've been through that are teaching just that, is dual awareness, is eating mindfully, right? Very, very slowly with a particular mantra or prayer or blessing. And it does make people feel better. Like it is very healing to live that lifestyle. So of course, you haven't invented it like completely, right? And I
No,
haven't
yeah,
invented
yeah.
it. It was always there.
Yeah, the foundation for sure. That's kind of the starter, and then like the deeper healing is
Yeah.
where like my own original practices kind of come more into play. But we need that foundation. We have to be able to notice that presence. And yeah, it just creates a healthy lifestyle overall. Like even if we're not healing from something specifically, it allows us to be in that presence that teaches our body safety and connection and improves regulation and digestion and just all the things.
Yeah. So I have a question here as we're on the topic. Um, in terms of complex trauma, complex PTSD, sometimes I've heard from people that mindfulness and even these methods, it can be like a little tricky, like you have to measure the steps. It can be too much. Or maybe it's what you're saying, yeah, like one piece at a time, right? It just feeling the skin in the shower, feeling the clothes against your skin, that can be an exercise for the next few months going ahead. But have you had any experience with, like, where you had to do more work than like to even allow mindfulness to emerge, if you get my question?
Yeah, I do. Yes. So the trauma that I was self-healing was very complex. I was actually
Mm-hmm.
diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder in 2017, and I was able to fully heal it by 2020. So it took me 3 years to fully heal something that is known to be incurable. And the traditional approaches were not quite enough. And so from that foundation that I mentioned, I dove deeper into kind of the next level of the practices. And these are some of the stuff that I teach in my book and I teach my clients and things. And so the first one was using my voice all the time for all the
Uh-huh.
reasons, always. So that was chanting and singing and humming and being able to feel your voice brings presence because I could not feel sensations in my body. I could not feel the water on my skin. I could not feel the food in my mouth. I could not feel things. Nothing was getting processed accurately, partly because of the traumatic brain injury, partly because of 20 years of repeated complex trauma. Um, and so using my voice was a huge key, and using vocal vibrations is known for regulating the nervous system through the vagus nerve. And so I would do that, but then I would do it in a way that also rewired unconscious memories in my body. So we have two types of memories, the conscious ones and the unconscious ones, basically. The conscious ones are what we like normally think of when we're like, oh, I remember that, or I have a memory of this. The unconscious ones are sensations and movement patterns in the body. So when you know how to drive a car, when someone says something and you have an emotional response that you feel in your body, those are from unconscious memories. And they affect over 80% of our emotions and choices without us knowing about them. And so I would use vocal vibrations in general to help bring presence and grounding and nervous system regulation. But then I would use specific practices that helped rewire those unconscious memories. So, what does that look like? A core of it was tending to the unmet needs that were at the root of trauma. So when there's trauma, it's not just about the experience we went through, but it's about the unmet needs that made it so traumatic. Not feeling safe, not feeling seen, not feeling loved and accepted and supported, feeling rejected, feeling abandoned, feeling abused, feeling neglected, feeling like you are not worthy of good things, feeling whatever the feeling was. And that feeling of those unmet needs got stuck in the body. And that's a huge part of the core of the trauma, right? And so by finding love songs that proclaimed the love that I felt separate from and singing that to myself, for example, I was able to bring up all the emotions of how I didn't feel like that was true and release them through my voice as I sang. So a lot of times it would start as just like normal singing, and then there'd be like this full body sobbing and screaming while I'm singing. And then like it comes back down and I feel peace afterwards because there was an emotional release by kind of pushing the button of like, remember all the emotions about how you didn't feel loved like this. And then you sing that love song, and then the love that you felt separate from comes released through the body. And screaming or shouting or crying or tears or just allowing the singing itself to carry the angst and frustration of not feeling that love in the past out of your body. Another one was chanting affirmations and allowing, same thing, allowing all the feelings of that was never true for me to come up in the body and get released, to let it move through me and not stay stuck. And then the more that there was the singing or the chanting or whatever practice I was doing, the more stuff got alchemized, and then the more this new message became true in my body. So that was one of the practices, was just using the voice. Do you have any thoughts on that before I share another practice that I was using?
I do know that I was using some of these methods as well. I know very well that oh yeah, that there are a lot of stories about singing and remembering, and it's very
Yeah.
interesting. It's exactly what you were saying. As I remember, there was one episode. It's a very long story, so I'm not going to go into that because it will start snowballing. But I do remember I said, no, I have to sit down and I have to listen to love songs, and we'll see where it takes me. And for an hour I was sitting and listening to love songs, and I started crying, and then I remembered things that somehow they got completely blocked out of my mind, and I had no idea why. I just couldn't remember. Suddenly I remembered everything, and it was beautiful. And in the end, I got up, it's okay, I remember everything. Well, actually nothing bad happened, so I've no idea, I've just alchemized something. I guess I can go on with my life. So it does make a lot of sense, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's, of course, there are other processes there, and I do have a question about body and embodiment and kind of that direction going there. But I think, yeah, feel free to feel free to continue, because you do
Yeah.
mention the body and the now and the presence, and to me it's all very, very connected, because I think the main issue that happens to us, right, when we have to, and everyone has some form of trauma, that can be very minor or very major, but what it does, it kicks us out of the body. And maybe, in my experience, has been that some therapies and some methods, they keep us stuck in our heads rather than make us feel present in the body. And that's where because I've met so many people who disassociate even more, like they want to talk about things but are not able to feel things, and then it's like so difficult to. So I'd yeah, I'd love to talk more about body and embodiment, and that's probably where you were going with it as
Yes,
well.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of time is just spending too much time in the head. For example, I was working with somebody and they have these bursts of anger, and they would usually, from that space, go to a mental place of processing, and then kind of a distraction of like, I'm going to go consume something, like Instagram or YouTube, or just like consume content by somebody to kind of redirect my energy. And I'm like, both of those things are keeping you in your mind and out of your body. You want to take that anger and alchemize it through movement. Go exercise, go lift weights, go scream on a mountaintop. Use your body, use the power that is anger. Anger is so much power and strength, and you can use it. And then you're taking this seemingly negative energy of anger and you're neutralizing it. And then it's just this raw energy that you can use however you choose. So then you want to go and use it to create something, not consume. So instead of processing in the mind and like mentally working through stuff, let go of all your thoughts and go get in your body, exercise, move, use your voice, scream, shout, something. And then instead of consuming something, go create something, go write, go speak, go do that creative project, go get those tasks done, go do that thing for work, whatever it is, but create something from that energy that's now been neutralized. So along with using my voice, another thing that I did, because regular mindfulness was not necessarily enough to get me in my body because of complex trauma, was using a mirror everywhere I went for everything I did. There was so much dissociation. I could not recognize myself in a mirror. I could not understand the connection of my inner and outer reality. Like if I picked up food, I could see it. And if I ate it, I could taste it. But the food that I saw and the food that I tasted had no reality, because the food I saw was kind of my mind being aware. And then the food I tasted was in my body, and my mind and my body were completely disconnected. And so I used a mirror everywhere I went for everything I did. When I went grocery shopping, I was the crazy lady in the store with my noise canceling headphones because I couldn't handle the stimulus, walking around with a mirror to make sure that I could stay oriented with myself while I picked out my groceries at the store. I used a mirror while driving and just had it out of the corner of my eye, focused on the road. I wasn't directly looking in the mirror, but just having my peripheral vision see myself was so grounding and reorienting. When I ate, I would have a mirror there so that the thing I was noticing in my mind and my body, which were separate, could then be reconnected, because I was like, that's the body that's feeling this. That's the mind that's aware of the body. And it was creating this new connection with myself when that connection was completely severed. I would use mirror practices for 20 minutes to 2 hours, just depending on how intense the symptoms were and how much time I had, every morning and every evening when I first woke up and before I went to bed. Fall asleep at night with a mirror next to my bed. And years later, I still do that just because it feels good to be connected to myself. Use mirrors all the time, everywhere, for everything. And it was able to rewire the stuff that made mindfulness hard, basically, right? Because when you're trying to practice mindfulness and your mind's really busy, your body's kind of separate, it's reliving the trauma, you're having a hard time just being present and being in that self-awareness. When you have a mirror, it's rebuilding those networks that aren't fully connected in the brain, basically, and it's reorienting you with yourself. And so mirror practices were a staple of my journey and one of my favorite things to teach in my work now.
That's interesting. I do remember it was in my early teenage years. Yeah. I do remember mirrors were feeling a bit weird. Yeah, there was a time. It's an interesting. As you were talking, I remember that I kind of it took me back to that place, and I did have depersonalization more than dissociation, but I it was very strange. I was thinking, oh, can that be me? Oh gosh.
Yeah, yeah,
There
yeah.
is, and I don't mean like, you wake
Orientation.
up in the morning and like, it was
Yeah,
different. So yeah,
I
but
totally
that's,
get. Yeah, sometimes you don't feel real. Sometimes it's
mm-hmm,
like,
mm-hmm,
wait, the inner world that I sense doesn't seem connected with the person that I'm seeing.
exactly.
Sometimes who you see doesn't look familiar and it feels like a complete stranger. When I
Yes.
first started looking in the mirror in 2018 for my self-healing journey, it was almost a year after I'd quit all the therapies and all the meds and everything. And I'm like, what am I going to do now? I started looking in a mirror. And it was terrifying. It was a
Yes.
full body overwhelm of fear to its deepest root. I mean, you could take someone afraid because they're in a burning forest or some like real life threatening thing. And I'm sure the brain activity and dysregulation would be about parallel to what I felt looking in a mirror, like no exaggeration. It was full body terror, full body, like I was in a horror show, but I was just looking at myself. And half of my face extended away from my body and down about 1.5 feet. And I could only actually see half my face on my body. There was just this blank space here, and the other half of my face was way over here. I couldn't recognize who it was. Like I didn't have an orientation of, like I recognized myself from a few years ago, and then look, there's me now. Like there was no data in my brain to support that theory. Like there was no connection. And then the inner and outer worlds being completely separate. And it was around that time, I think I'd heard the quote, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek.
Mm.
I think that's by Joseph Campbell. And I was like, well, I definitely fear entering the cave of a mirror practice. So what if that's the space that holds the treasure that I'm seeking? And it ended up being exactly that. And so it took me quite a while to work through that fear, but it was just through presence and showing up every day and just letting myself eye gaze in a mirror that I was able to expand my window of tolerance. It wasn't that the fear got smaller, but it's that my courage got bigger. And so the window of tolerance slowly expanded. But within a year, I was able to use these mirror practices to take any symptom that was coming up. And at that time, there was over 100 debilitating health conditions from the 20 years of trauma. But I could take any single thing I was experiencing and do a mirror practice that was targeted for that symptom or that struggle. And within 20 minutes to an hour, usually, sometimes a little longer if it was really bad, but usually I could take it from like a 10 intensity to like a 4. And then I was able to navigate my day while still in the process of healing. But it was also rewiring the root cause of a lot of it. And I was able to use mirrors as one of the core foundations for that healing transformation.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. It's so when we talk about the root cause and working with issues at the root, what is that for you? What is the root for you?
Yeah, I love that. The core root, from my perspective and the models that I teach, is recognizing the unmet needs and rebuilding the relationship with those parts of you to meet those needs in the now. When there are those past traumas, like mentioned earlier, it wasn't just about the traumatic events, it's about the needs that weren't met. You did not feel safe. You did not feel connected, did not feel supported, did not feel loved and accepted, did not feel like you were valuable or wanted, did not feel like you were respected and honored, did not feel like there was guidance or direction or belonging or just all these different needs. I call them attachment needs because they create the attachments inside of our brain and inside of parts of ourselves, and they determine the attachment styles that we have with other people as well. And so when we meet those needs and we recognize them, and then we kind of recognize the part of us holding it, we can tend to those needs through a relationship with ourselves. And then that's also where mirrors become very powerful, because when you look in a mirror, you're having a social interaction. So when we have social interactions with other people, there's eye contact, there's facial expressions and movements, there's body language, there's vocal cues, right? Like it's not just the words that I'm saying, because otherwise it would be monotone, but it's the fluctuations in the tone of the voice that explain safety and calm versus stress and urgency, and these different tones that kind of direct us, not just in the words, but in the way that they're being said. And so we can take all of those social cues, if you will, and use them intentionally in a mirror practice to recreate a social experience, social interaction, a relationship with those parts of ourselves. Because a lot of the trauma that we go through is relational trauma. It was verbal, it was psychological, it was physical, it was sexual, it was emotional. There was relational trauma, and there was a relationship, a social interaction with another person that caused those needs to be unmet, and then created trauma that lives in the body and now creates the dysregulation and the symptoms and the dis-ease that we experience. And so if we can take that model of a relational experience interacting with a person, but that person is ourselves in a mirror, and we take those unmet needs from the trauma and we meet them for those parts of ourselves in the present moment, that's where we start to actually rewire and heal the root cause. And that's why looking back at the trauma is not necessary. You don't have to go into the details. It's really just a reference point to understand your deepest needs that are needing to be met right here, right now.
Yeah, right now. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. It's so it's again, it's this perspective of being bigger, not following one particular part, right? It's just this.
Yeah.
I have another angle on the root that I wanted to explore, and it's, how shall I say, to what extent does, or not in general, but to what extent did you feel affected by ancestral trauma or ancestral issues and intergenerational issues? And kind of how did it, and if so, how did it play into your journey?
Yeah, I love that question. So this can be such a dive, a spiral, because there's so much to it, right?
Yes.
But one thing I will say is So I found out earlier on in my life, after I think it was the first or second sexual trauma that I'd experienced as a teenager, that my grandmother had been abused as well as a child. She'd gone through a massive amount of trauma, including sexual abuse when she was between the ages of 4 and 6, along with just a whole series of other things. And it was normalized. So when I brought up trauma that I went through as a teenager, I think she was the only adult I told for whatever reason. She completely expressionless, like no reaction on the face, right? Like someone says something horrible. Normally there's like, oh my goodness, it's some kind of reaction, but completely neutral on the face. She's like, oh yeah, that happens. Wait, what? I'm sorry. Excuse me. What? I just told you about this massive trauma, and it's been completely normalized. And that is a key piece of that kind of intergenerational trauma, is when our parents, our grandparents, our great parents, our grandparents, our ancestors have gone through trauma, then the trauma imprints get passed down through the parenting and the attachment development. And so when there's this baby being born into the world, the parent has trauma imprints. The way that they engage with that baby, the way that they raise the child, the way that they help them navigate their emotions, the way that they help them know boundaries, the way that they understand how to relate with their own bodies and respect their bodies and take care of their bodies, the way that they understand how to relate and associate with other people. All of those patterns are unconsciously or subconsciously passed down, and it's just normal. And so for a very long time, we've been in a survival state where so much trauma was normalized. Women didn't have a lot of rights. Men kind of owned women as property many decades ago. And it's been this gradual breaking free, but so many of those imprints are still there, where just so many things. And so that was kind of one pattern I noticed very specifically, the fact that I went through childhood sexual abuse, and my grandmother had too. But for her, it was normalized and never processed. And then I came along as the one to break it and be like, wait, no, this is not normal. This is not okay. I am not going to live like this. I am going to rewire it. And the story ends with me. The story ends here and now with me. And I get to help other people break the cycle too. And so this starts with that awareness and having the courage to make a new choice. Like we can say, oh yeah, I struggle with addiction because my parents did, because it was just passed down. It's in my lineage. Yes, sure, it has been, but you also have the power to rewire that and to change the story and to change the narrative and to embody that transformation. So you no longer struggle with addiction, and you no longer pass those imprints down to anybody you interact with, not just your kids. That's where it's the strongest, right? But if you hang out with a group of friends, their imprints, their habits get passed down to you. And so you kind of just you learn from what you see. We're meant to mirror what we experience. That's kind of part of our human
There's the
neurobiology.
mirror again. There's the mirror.
The mirror again, exactly. And that's why mirrors are so powerful, because you start to choose what you're mirroring. Instead of it being unconsciously mirrored from others, you confront those parts of you and say, I get to choose what reality I mirror within myself. And that's the ultimate reclamation of power, because I could have mirrored the ancestral trauma. I could have mirrored my grandmother saying, it's normal, I'm helpless, I'm powerless, men own me, I don't get to have respect or connection for my body. I don't know how to help other people process their emotions because I never processed my own. The list goes on and on. Or we can say, wait, no, I have power, and that's not the narrative that I want to choose to live inside of my body for the rest of my life. And so it's partly in the intergenerational and ancestral trauma. Part of it is those specific life events that kind of rewire us. And then there can be a pattern for so many different reasons. And then there's also the more kind of abstract thing of like, if you don't know how to regulate your emotions, or you're dysregulated all of the time, or you don't know how to feel any emotions, those patterns get passed down through our social interactions, especially between parent and child, but in society in general. We just learn by the social interactions that we have. And if everyone's disconnected from their emotions, or everyone's dysregulated all of the time, we start to take on that energy. And so that's how it can kind of get passed down and flow into our experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I like to see it as kind of I am made, or I carry my ancestors in my body. It is an embodied, and from the point of view of science, it is an embodied experience because they do exist in my body. But it's true, there is also that, the other reality where my ancestors are waiting for me, for us to break the cycle because they didn't know any better. But absolutely, those patterns, whether they are, most of them are subconscious. Like, of course, I don't believe that. So my mother would tell me, oh, you just have to cater for a man and be a nobody. My daughter, that's what I want for you. Of course, those are
Yeah,
subconscious
yeah, it's
patterns,
not
but then
explicitly taught. It's just kind of shown through the way that they kind of navigate themselves and then kind of teach responses to things without even realizing it a lot of the time.
absolutely, and anxiety or inability to deal
Right.
with, definitely, I see that. So in a certain sense, that then, well, not in a certain sense, I mean, for real, you get to heal your ancestors as well through healing yourself and through making different choices.
Yeah,
And that's,
absolutely. I believe our embodied healing can heal 7 generations back and seven
yes,
generations forward, actually rewiring not just a network in the brain, but our DNA on a cellular level. Like people come up and say
absolutely.
that I'm just like radiant and they could feel my energy from across the room. And I'm like, yeah, but you couldn't do that 5 years ago because my energy was so fragmented and so stagnant and so chaotic. And we actually change our electromagnetic field, our DNA, the way that our cells in our body are communicating. Yes, the trillions of neural networks in our brain. I mean, just so many miracles. And then we get to pass that down on to the next generation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the wider context of that, I love that you mentioned that we affect the environment around us and we are affected by the environment around us. So also choosing wisely what we read
Yeah.
and who we talk to, at
Absolutely.
least. But yeah, I forgot where I was going with that choosing wisely. um, but I'd like to ask you more about the work that you do and the kind of what you offer. So, because we've been talking for a while now, and maybe someone who is listening is interested to find out more and would say, okay, well, how do I find her? What can I do?
Absolutely, be honored to share. So, firstly, you can always connect with me on Instagram. Pop into my DMs, just say, "Hey, heard that podcast episode," and then I have a free guided mirror practice. It's 20-minute audio guide to eye gaze and mirrors, and it's just this gentle, loving practice to reconnect with yourself, really create some powerful shifts in mind and body. And then I have a course, which is a great kind of baby step, but then the real juicy, magical transformational work is through one-on-one mentorship. And so that's weekly video calls, guided practices, daily practices you use at home. And then I have different monthly packages for that. So you can find all the information on my website. People can book a free strategy session with me to get together, meet, and just see if this is a good fit for them. And then you can, explore the free practice and everything as well.
Wonderful. And you do work with trauma and complex trauma, and yeah, so kind of
Yeah, I think over half of my clients on average struggle with a complex trauma diagnosis such as dissociative identity disorder, and it's such a breath of fresh air because for the first time in maybe 10, 20 years of being on the healing journey, they're finally able to get to know parts of themselves and not have to revisit trauma to heal, and actually start to have practices where they feel that connection with those parts of themselves. They're getting to build this whole new relationship with their inner world, and they're not healing just by cycling back through the trauma or coping with the symptoms, but really understanding their inner world and having those daily tools to navigate it in a new way. So it's very, very powerful.
It's beautiful, yeah, and thank you for the work that you are doing. It does feel very powerful, and it's needed. And kind of, it's leaving me with the idea. that so much more is needed, because I'm noticing mental health issues. I wouldn't say they're on the rise. Maybe they are. I don't know, like for the whole world, but they're becoming more obvious. It's like if you don't have coping mechanisms now, you better find them because it's not
Yeah.
going to get easy, right? There's the pressure. There's so much more pressure. So I think this type of work is absolutely crucial, but it's also for me it's not negative because it's like a call to reconnect to the reality, to the present moment, to find that vaster support network. I remembered where I was going with that, that we're also connected to the, not just to people and to ancestors, but of course we're connected to the whole reality around us, like the nature and the earth and the sun and the moon and the trees. And then we do really become much bigger than our trauma when we expand into that awareness. But I think it's so very much needed now because if we lock into our brains and start scrolling the news, it goes into the opposite direction.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we're kind of stepping into that next layer of our evolution where we all will have those tools to be able to understand our inner worlds and navigate, our emotions differently and our
Yeah.
minds and our bodies in a whole new way. And it's not even just for healing, but it's for expansion as well. So I have also
Yes.
worked with people who've never been through trauma, but they're trying to step into their creativity or their self-expression or their purpose, and there's just these blocks and they can't get unstuck. And they've tried the just working from the mind, but they need that embodied transformation. And even then, it's getting to know the different parts of you, getting to understand their needs and how to meet those needs through the relationship you have with yourself. And then everything else unfolds very naturally. You get more creative, more inspiration, more clarity, more focus, more drive. Like things just line up because you're coming from love and wholeness instead of kind of this space where you're separate from all the different parts of you. And so I think it's really these foundational tools for healing the deepest traumas and the greatest battles and mental illness or whatever might be going on, to stepping in our purpose and thriving and having healthy relationships and calling in your soulmate and living your purpose and like all the things we want to expand into. And ultimately, I think it's just a beautiful path to experience more peace, joy, wholeness, inner freedom, embodied worthiness, and empowered confidence. And who couldn't use a little more of that?
Yes, 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 we need that. Well, thank you so much, Kristen. And I'll post the links to connect with you in the podcast description when it's up. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank